Just now, we talked about high volume training. The suggestion I gave you for high volume training was to change the type of carbohydrates he consumes. In fact, changing the type of carbohydrates he consumes is essentially changing the type of sugar. So when high volume clients are trying to lose weight, as long as you don't restrict their total calorie intake, just have them stop consuming all artificial sweeteners and added sugars. Simply replace them with natural carbohydrates. When it comes to losing weight, as long as you avoid artificial sweeteners and added sugars, you can actually eat as many carbohydrates as you want. I can eat 10 sesame pancakes in one meal and still keep my body fat under 10%. In reality, your level of obesity isn't that closely related to how many carbohydrates you eat. It's just that we've been brainwashed by these so-called experts for so long into believing that eating more carbs will definitely make you fat. That's not necessarily true. Really not necessarily. In a moment, I'll explain to everyone that the real cause of obesity isn't carbohydrates, and it's not about how much carbs you eat. But eating carbs does make people happy and gives a sense of satisfaction. So the advice you give to your clients is to swap refined grains for whole grains, cut out added sugars, and also remove artificial sweeteners. That's enough. These are the most basic requirements. I'm not going to control how much you eat. You can eat as much as you want, as long as you avoid these things. You can eat white rice, but you need to pay attention. For example, more expensive rice isn't necessarily better because it may have added ingredients and sometimes the surface is even polished. These things matter. Also, if someone is both overweight and in pain, actually if there's inflammation causing pain, it's not good for fat loss. For members who are both overweight and in pain, I usually have them switch the types of carbohydrates they eat. I might replace some gluten-containing carbs with those that are gluten-free. Gluten can trigger inflammation in your body. It's an inflammatory agent. What is gluten? It's the part of wheat that comes with the husk. Gluten has a very specific proportion. This afternoon, I'll look up and find some data to show you. In our country, there are currently about 10 million people who are allergic to gluten. So you can easily replace wheat-based foods with rice instead. If you really want to eat something like noodles, you can have oats, buckwheat, or quinoa. All of these are naturally gluten-free. In supermarkets, there are special types of foods labeled as gluten-free, specifically marked as gluten-free carbohydrates. Let me show you the full ingredient list of these common foods. I'll teach you a simple rule. When you choose packaged foods in the future, as long as the first 3 ingredients include any added sugar or artificial sweeteners, you should just pass on it immediately. Do you understand what I mean? I'll teach you how to simplify complicated things. Whenever you're choosing any food, if the first 3 ingredients on the ingredient list include added sugar or artificial sweeteners, don't buy it. If someone has inflammation, have them check if there are artificial sweeteners inside. Members who are experiencing pain shouldn't eat things that contain too many artificial sweeteners because they will keep your body in a state of inflammation, making it hard for you to recover or slowing down your recovery. So if your child eats too many packaged foods that contain too much added sugar, it will easily make them gain weight, especially what? Especially before they finish puberty and their growth and development are not yet complete, they shouldn't eat too much added sugar or artificial sweeteners. Tomorrow I will explain to everyone that before a child finishes puberty and their growth and development stop, their fat cells are continuously increasing in number. Our body fat depends on both the number and the size of fat cells. For adults, weight gain is basically due to fat cells getting bigger. But for children, gaining weight means both an increase in the number and the size of fat cells. After puberty, the number of fat cells no longer increases. Once an adult, unless you're extremely overweight, your fat cell count stops increasing. They only get larger. However, before you're fully grown, consuming too much added sugar or artificial sweeteners will multiply your fat cells. What is the downside of having more and more fat cells? You will develop a body type that is prone to gaining weight. Moreover, after you lose weight, it will be harder to maintain because you naturally have more fat cells than others. So, generally speaking, if children consume too much added sugar before puberty, it will increase the number of their fat cells. Now take these potato chips. Look at the nutrition label. It's for 100 grams. How many carbs are in that? 63.7 grams, about 64. For example, a standard can is 100 grams. Chips are very light. Large bags can be 200 or even 300 grams. If you eat 300 grams of potato chips, how many carbohydrates is that? How much does that add up to? Almost 200, right? Now look at its fat content, 25.8 grams. So this thing is basically a mix of oil and sugar. Aside from carbs, it's all fat. That's why kids, especially during puberty, before their growth and development stop, should eat as little of this as possible. This is the fastest way to increase the number of fat cells. Do you understand? Faster than what? It is even quicker than KFC chicken burgers. And what exactly is this thing? Salt. Look at how much it accounts for in your daily nutrient intake, 39%. So if you eat 2 boxes of this, you've basically reached your daily recommended salt intake. So what happens if you eat too much salt? You'll retain water. Consuming an excessive amount of salt will cause water retention and swelling or edema. So if your clients eat carbs and those carbs contain a lot of salt, then their weight will not decrease because not only are they gaining fat, but they're also retaining additional water. That's why you often have female clients who regularly say, I need to go to a traditional Chinese medicine wellness center for moxibustion to get rid of dampness. If you just eat fewer potato chips, there won't be any dampness to get rid of. Because if you eat so much salt, of course you'll retain water. Do you still remember how this thing is calculated? What do you divide by 8,400? 2,112 divided by 8,400, then multiplied by 100, and you get 25. In other words, if you eat just 4 packs of potato chips a day, you've already reached your total daily calorie limit. And actually, the limit set by the government is pretty high, 2,000. So, as I just mentioned, if your female clients consume less than 1,400, it will affect their mood. They'll feel down and unhappy. That's why generally we have them eat around 1,500. Now take a look at this. This is bread. In bread, the carbohydrate content is only 13%, and this one is 39 grams, while this one is 63.7 grams. So you'll notice that the carbohydrate content in bread is nowhere near as high as in potato chips. It's much lower than in potato chips. Members often say, I can't have carbs, but I eat so little, just a few potato chips. Those chips can have more carbs than 2 slices of bread. Plus, bread is very low in fat. But the fat content in potato chips is very high. So after you eat potato chips, what does that amount to? It's basically like eating rice mixed with braised pork, essentially a combination of fat and sugar. Isn't this the brand of bread you often see in the supermarket? So what does this brand of bread contain? For example, white sugar. This is added sugar. So if you're a member trying to lose excess fat and you choose whole wheat bread, it's best to select a variety without white sugar. Basically, simply choose whole wheat bread without added sugar. So basically, the carbs chosen by members who are trying to lose fat are not really suitable if you buy whole wheat bread from the supermarket. You can make your own whole wheat bread without adding sugar. But basically, almost all the whole wheat bread you buy in the market contains added sugar, unless you go to a very high-end bakery. However, in those high-end bakeries, the flour they use is refined. So it's better to just buy some grains from the countryside and make it yourself. To sum up for everyone here, the bad boys of the food world are added sugars and artificial sweeteners. So if added sugar appears in the first 3 ingredients on the ingredient list, skip it. And if there are artificial sweeteners in the ingredient list, skip it as well. Once you eliminate these 2 things, you'll find that you can't choose 80 to 90% of the packaged foods sold in supermarkets. In other words, 80 to 90% of all edible foods sold in supermarkets contain added sugar and artificial sweeteners. Why is that? Because it tastes good and improves the texture. The things you make are healthy, but if they taste bad, who am I going to sell them to? So if your client wants to increase their food intake and doesn't want to restrict their diet but still wants to lose body fat, you just need to have them replace packaged foods with natural, unprocessed foods. That alone will make a very significant difference. In other words, don't buy those prepackaged or processed foods. Don't think, I'm eating whole wheat bread, I'm drinking sugar-free cola, so how could I still be gaining weight? Of course you'll gain weight. The glycemic index of whole wheat bread is much higher than that of white rice or homemade flatbread. Take the flatbread I make at home, for example. I can eat 5 of them, which is quite a lot, but the glycemic index is only around 7 point something, 8 at most. But how many grams of whole wheat bread do I eat? About 300 grams, and the glycemic index shoots up to nearly 10. In other words, whole wheat bread raises blood sugar more than flat bread, which in turn is higher than rice. I'm talking about the kind sold in supermarkets.